Hello there, Mad Mike here, and welcome back to the channel for video number 3. Um, Now, I actually looked in the news earlier, and I didn't see this, and then I saw this afterwards. If I had seen this sooner, this probably would have been the first video I would have put out today instead of the last, but um, classic horror director Stuart Gordon has passed away at the age of 72. Now, for those of you who are unfamiliar with the name Stuart Gordon and some of the films that he's directed, um, let's just get rid of the big one right out of the gate, which is Re-Animator, From Beyond, Castle Freak, which is another Lovecraftian one. And really, he did a lot of stuff for the lower budgeted areas, and he's known for kind of like the tongue-in-cheek type of comedy, the kind of over-the-top special effects. Uh, you know, that most of the time has to do with his films. You can think back to Re-Animator, where the scene with the head giving head, which is an amazing thing. And Stuart Gordon was really able to kind of personify that. And really, the thing that he did was he really he made that atmosphere, that gory, horrible, nasty atmosphere of those films, and he made it tolerable, and he made it funny, and he made it almost slapstick. It felt a lot. It felt kind of a little bit of a step back from like Sam Raimi Evil Dead 2 era, like that kind of comedy. It was like maybe a little bit of a step back from that, but it's still eccentric. In a lot of these films, well, I shouldn't say a lot of them, but some of them, he worked with Jeffrey Combs, who obviously was Herbert West from Re-Animator, and then he came back again to play the lead in Castle Freak, which again was based off of another Lovecraftian thing. This is the other thing, is that Stuart Gordon was able to take Lovecraft, something that people have thought for years is unadaptable, from a written medium to a visual medium, and he was able to take that and he was able to make it into a product that people actually enjoyed. And here's the thing, is that people can make the argument of he changed the tone. Lovecraft isn't supposed to be funny, and this is all this stuff. It's like, look, in the end, he did it, and it's entertaining. So I'm willing to live with that. And the other thing is that nobody else is making good Lovecraft stuff, so there's really nothing to compare it to. So it wasn't really, one of those scenarios. But working with Jeffrey Combs, who he was bouncing around the scene everywhere back then in the '80s. With a lot of lower budgeted productions, a lot of Roger Corman type productions. So he. Those two were able to cooperate somewhat, but and eventually also there were the sequels to Re-Animated that were done, and obviously he was given credit for that because of the characters, but those were, I believe, written by different people, and also directed by different people. So he really didn't have too much of a hand in those, but he gets the credit because he created. Well, I shouldn't say created, but he adapted those characters to screen. And like I said before, his work with effects, like the effects that you see in his movies, like especially stuff like From Beyond, like some of those makeup effects that they have in that are insane. And he always kind of pushed the envelope in his movies on what you could do with, what modern effects were at the time. Again, you can look back at Re-Animated, the gore effects in that movie alone. Some of them are a little kind of corny, like the cat is a little bit corny, but like the gore effects where you got the severed heads and the corpses and stuff walking around, and all the stuff, the tentacles and stuff at the end, all the stuff that they do in that movie with the special effects is spectacular. And it shows really, what you can do with a low budget and a lot of dedicated, talented people, doing stuff behind the camera. But it really did go to show like what he could do if you gave him good material to work with. It's one of those type of directors where you can hand him something that is kind of in his wheelhouse, which is really kind of that horror comedy, that very, very fine, gory horror comedy, and give that to him, and he can just make gold out of it. And I think that's really what people should take away from his filmmaking, is that he made films that were fun. He made films that were at least enjoyable to watch. Stuff like Robot Jox. I completely forgot until I looked up his filmography that he directed Robot Jox. And Robot Jox is one of the greatest marionette shows you will ever watch. And I say that because the giant mech robots that they have in it are basically just giant stop motion puppets. And we're not talking like Ray Harryhausen. We're talking like it's stupid. It's a dumb movie, but it's fun to watch because of the overacting and because of the insanity of the plot, because of all the crazy stuff that happens in it. And I think the thing that people need to take away from his films is that they're just fun movies. They're just fun movies, and that's one of the things that I think separates directors from me. You can have those really serious directors that make all these great dramas and stuff like that, like Martin Scorsese. And then you can have other guys like Stuart Gordon who just make films that are just insanity, but fun insanity, entertaining insanity. And honestly, I'm not going to come home on a Tuesday afternoon and pop in, Taxi Driver. That's just not me. Maybe if it was like a Friday night and I had somebody that hadn't seen it or something like that. But it's not a movie that I watch, continuously. And I can say that about a lot of serious films. But I can pop in Re-Animator 7 or 8 days in a row and probably still enjoy it on the 8th day and keep going. I just, don't like the gratuity. And that's something that I've always really valued in a film, especially an older film, is kind of that rewatchability portion of it. And Stuart Gordon's films have that. They don't really get old in terms of what it is, because it still looks disturbing. It still looks real in a lot of cases. You can see some of the seams here and there, especially on some of the earlier entries. But at the same time, the special effects are amazing. And if I shouldn't tell you to sit little kids down in front of Re-Animator, but just saying, kids wouldn't notice any of that anyway, or at least people that are younger aren't paying attention to it. Obviously it's not going to be like a CGI fest like it is today, but that's something unfortunately that's lost on a lot of today's movies is the practical effects angle. But back to Stuart Gordon as a director, he really was able to exemplify those type of things out of his films. That horror comedy. Well, sometimes it was just straight horror. Castle Freak is less of a comedy and more of an actual straight horror film. And it has a darker tone to it than something like Re-Animator or From Beyond. But I think the best part of that is that it shows that he can have some contrast. That he does have that niche. He has that niche of the gory horror comedy that he can do really, really well. But he could branch out a little bit here and there into more serious territory, and I think that's what you want in a director. You want a little bit more versatility. And then you can just go balls to the wall insanity, like what Robot Jox is. God, we should do that for Rated R Riffs at some point, which, by the way, that's coming back. But again, this is about Stuart Gordon because that's the unfortunate part of this is that Stuart Gordon I don't think gets enough credit for the films that he's made. He gets credit for Re-Animator. He always gets credit for Re-Animator, but some of the other films, From Beyond, it's kind of a semi-close second to Re-Animator. That one gets mentioned a decent amount, but Castle Freak doesn't get mentioned. Robot Jock shouldn't get mentioned, but it does sometimes. But the whole thing is that I think he should have been given a lot more work, but unfortunately the horror market kind of died out in the 90s, which pretty much kneecapped any chances of him getting bigger budgeted films, especially given what he had been working with before. And really, he did a couple other stints on TV. He did a couple episodes for Masters of Horror and stuff like that, but it's a shame that that he didn't get more, and I was kind of hoping maybe with all this drudging up of 80s nostalgia, maybe they'd hire him on to come do something again. But unfortunately, obviously, that hasn't happened. But I'd like to know what you guys think. Do you know a lot of Stuart Gordon's films? Are you a fan of his? Are you a fan of Re-Animator, From Beyond, Robot Jox? Castle Freak, and any of those films or any of his other films that I haven't mentioned here. Again, I like to know what you're thinking, so put your thoughts in the comments below. And remember to hit the bell for notifications, hit the like button, subscribe, and remember, I live my life free of compromise. Do you?